Overheard my brother's fiancée scheming to drain his $30,000 savings behind his back, so I exposed her at their engagement party, expecting gratitude, but instead, he punched me in front of everyone and cut me out of his life completely. A year passed in silence, until he called, voice shaking, to apologize after finally discovering the truth. Turns out, betrayal runs deep, but regret runs even deeper. My name's Alex, and I'm in my early 30s. My older brother, David, is a few years older than me. Growing up, we were your average siblings. We weren't super tight, but we weren't distant either. We'd catch up during holidays and family events, sometimes grab coffee or watch a game together. Our parents are still together, and we have a fairly large extended family. Lots of aunts, uncles, and cousins we see on a regular basis. David started dating Amy about 2 years before they got engaged. She seemed okay when I first met her, friendly enough at family dinners. She had a normal job, and David looked happy. Our parents liked her too. They announced their engagement about 8 months before the wedding, and that's where things started to get interesting. David's always been super responsible with his money. He's had a steady job for years, saved consistently, and followed a clear plan. He talked to me several times about saving $30,000 as a down payment for a house he wanted to buy. He had the money tucked away in a high-interest savings account he'd used for a long time. The first red flag showed up a couple of months after they got engaged. We were at a big family barbecue at our parents' house. People were hanging out in the yard and on the porch. I was walking past an open window when I heard Amy talking on the phone inside. I couldn't catch every word because of the noise, but I heard enough to stop in my tracks. She was talking about money. I heard her say $30,000, then something about moving it and crypto. She let out this little high-pitched laugh and said, "He won't even notice for a while." I didn't catch the rest, but the way she said it gave me a weird feeling, like she was doing something shady. She said something about our future, but it didn't sound like something she and David were building together. It sounded more like she was taking his money for herself. The $30,000 stood out, especially since David had just told me that exact number for his house savings. Over the next week, I tried bringing it up with him casually. I asked how the saving was going, if he was getting close to his goal. He brushed it off weirdly, just said it was fine and on track. That was strange. He usually liked updating me about his progress. Then I started noticing more odd things. Amy suddenly had this expensive-looking bracelet I hadn't seen before. She also went on a weekend trip with her friends that seemed pretty pricey and spontaneous. None of these things alone proved anything, but together, with what I'd overheard, they made me uneasy. I decided I had to tell David what I'd heard. I asked him to meet me for coffee somewhere private and laid it out calmly. I told him about hearing Amy talk about $30,000, crypto, and moving money without him knowing. I told him exactly where I was and why it stuck with me, especially knowing his savings goal. He got angry right away, said I must have misheard, accused me of being jealous because he was settling down before I was. He completely dismissed the idea that Amy would ever do something like that. He said she told him everything, especially about money. I pointed out the bracelet and the trip, and asked where that money came from. I suggested he just check his savings account balance. He shut it all down, said he trusted Amy 100%, and I was causing drama for no reason. I didn't give up right away. A few days later, I sent him a text trying again, hoping he'd read it when he was alone and actually think about it. All he replied was, "Leave it alone, Alex. You're wrong." After that, our relationship got awkward. He started avoiding my calls, and when we did talk, it was short and distant. I knew their engagement party was coming up. It was going to be a big celebration with all their family and friends. But the thought of David marrying someone who I was nearly certain had taken his money, it just wouldn't sit right. I kept asking myself if I should just drop it, but I couldn't let it go. Letting Amy take his money and potentially never face any consequences felt wrong. I felt like, as his brother, I had a responsibility to at least try to stop him from making a huge mistake. As the party got closer, things between us only got more tense. David was clearly annoyed that I wouldn't let it go, and I was frustrated he wouldn't listen. The engagement party was held at a rented hall. David and Amy's families were there, friends too, probably 80 people in all. There were speeches planned, and people were walking around, offering congratulations. My parents had warned me before the party to behave, don't stir anything up. That only made me more unsure. But seeing David there, smiling, with Amy by his side, knowing what I knew, it was eating at me. As the night went on, I realized waiting for another private moment was pointless. He hadn't listened before. I started thinking that the only way to get through to him was to make this public. Maybe the shock of it all, the presence of so many people, would make him actually hear me. Or maybe Amy would slip up if confronted in front of everyone. When there was a pause between speeches, and people were mostly seated, I walked up to the small stage and picked up a mic that had been left there. People went quiet and looked over at me, confused. David and Amy were across the room, near their families. I took a breath, steadied myself, and spoke into the microphone so everyone could hear. I introduced myself and said I was David's brother. Then I said I had something important to say about Amy. My parents looked shocked and upset. David's head snapped toward me, and I could see his face shift from confusion to anger. I said clearly that I heard Amy talking about how she was going to steal $30,000 from David. She said she planned to move it into crypto and make sure he wouldn't notice. I told David about it, but he didn't believe me. I felt like I had to tell the rest of the family. David deserved to know the truth about the woman he was about to marry, and both his and her families needed to know too. The moment I spoke up, everything exploded. People started shouting. Amy gasped loudly, then burst into tears, hiding her face. David yelled my name and pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with anger. Amy's family started screaming at me. My parents were frantically waving their hands at me, silently pleading for me to stop. People in the audience were whispering to each other. Some stood up to get a better view. David reached the stage and didn't even try to lower his voice. As soon as he got close, he swung and punched me square in the face. The hit made me stumble back. He yelled that I was lying, trying to destroy everything, and that I was out of my mind. Amy's mom rushed to console her while David shouted at me to leave, that he didn't want me around, not at the party, not in his life. The security team, who had been hired for the event, rushed over because of the commotion. David pointed at me and demanded they take me out. Amy's relatives echoed him, insisting I be removed. My parents looked heartbroken and stressed, but they didn't say a word to defend me. Their priority seemed to be calming everyone down and dealing with the shock of the punch. I set down the microphone. There was no use saying anything more with the room in chaos. And after getting hit, I had nothing left to add. The security guards held me by the arms, not roughly, but firmly, and walked me toward the exit. As they escorted me out, David kept yelling things from the stage. Amy was still sobbing loudly, making herself out to be the innocent victim of some cruel attack. Right before I stepped outside, I locked eyes with my parents. They looked stunned, ashamed, and deeply upset. Then I was out on the sidewalk, alone. My face throbbed where David had punched me. I walked away from the building. Almost immediately, my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice trembled. She didn't yell, but she was clearly shaken. She told me I had caused a huge scene, embarrassed the whole family, especially David and Amy, and that I had pushed David into reacting physically. She repeated what David said, that I had made up lies to ruin his happiness and pushed him to the edge. She said David didn't want anything to do with me anymore, and that, especially after things got physical, it would be best if I stayed away from family gatherings for a while. It was obvious they were siding with David, more concerned about the fallout than whether or not Amy had actually stolen the money. Other relatives started calling too. Some were shocked about the punch, but others stood by David. A few asked what had happened, but most told me I should apologize and try to fix things. But I didn't see how I could do that when I believed I was right. Amy was hiding something, and David had physically lashed out instead of facing the truth. David wouldn't take my calls or respond to texts. He completely cut me off. The weeks after the engagement party were lonely. My bruised face healed after a few days, but emotionally, I felt excluded and isolated. I wasn't part of any family talks about the wedding. When I did see relatives, things were strained. You could feel the tension. David and Amy told everyone their version of what happened, that I'd made up some cruel lie out of nowhere just to cause drama. And that's what they blamed for David hitting me. My parents didn't stop speaking to me entirely, but they kept their distance. They were clearly overwhelmed by the drama and more focused on keeping the peace with David than figuring out if I'd been telling the truth. My warning about the missing money didn't seem to matter anymore. All anyone focused on was the scene I caused and the fallout that followed. The wedding plans moved forward like nothing had happened. No one asked David to double-check his accounts. No one asked Amy about the money. The wedding happened a few months later. I wasn't invited. I didn't expect to be. I stayed home that day and tried to move on with my life. I focused on work, spent time with friends who listened to me without telling me what to do or judging me. David and Amy never reached out. My relationship with my parents became tense. We avoided tough conversations. We all knew David had cut me off, but no one really spoke about it. I watched things from a distance, getting vague updates about David and Amy from my parents. For a long time, there was no sign that anything was wrong. But recently, something shifted. My mom started sounding more careful, like she was hiding something when she talked about them. She mentioned that David seemed stressed, that he and Amy had been arguing. She didn't say much at first, just hinted they were having trouble. Then, a few days ago, she called me directly, not just a quick update. Her voice was tight, clearly distressed. She said David had found messages on Amy's phone, messages with other men. She didn't know how many, but she said there were 3 different guys. The messages were flirty and inappropriate, especially for someone who was married. One of the guys was apparently someone David saw all the time at the gym. David had come across the messages by accident. He confronted Amy, showed her the messages, and things blew up. My mom said Amy didn't deny talking to the guys, but tried to brush it off or blame David somehow. She didn't say how long it had been going on or how deep it was, but it was bad enough that David was devastated, not just by the cheating, but by all the lies. Now things between them are falling apart. They still live together, but they're constantly fighting. The news about the cheating has started spreading through the family, triggering a new wave of whispers and disbelief. But no one is connecting this with the $30,000 I had warned about. Everyone's focused on the infidelity. That's the crisis now. David is consumed with dealing with the betrayal. The marriage that meant more to him than his relationship with me. The one he went through with even after everything. Looks like it's coming apart. I warned him, and now he's in serious trouble because of what Amy did. The consequences of him fully trusting her and ignoring my concerns are starting to show. Even though this is a different lie from the one I originally warned him about, my issue isn't whether or not I should tell David about the cheating. That's not even an option. He completely cut me off. What really hurts is the whole situation. I'm still estranged from my brother because I tried to warn everyone that his fiancée had stolen money from him. And now, 6 months after the wedding that cost me my relationship with him, he's finally realizing that his wife has been lying to him in a big way. It proves I was right about her being a bad person, even if it's not about the same lie. The way the family treats me is starting to shift a little now that more of them are beginning to see who Amy really is. But the damage from what happened at the engagement party, when I spoke up and David cut me off, is still very real. I'm just watching everything fall apart from the sidelines, still locked out of the inner family circle David is part of. Now, thank you to everyone who read my first post and shared your thoughts. There were a few things that came up repeatedly, so I want to clarify some of them. A lot of people asked if I had any solid proof beyond overhearing Amy's conversation. The answer is no. I based my decision to speak up at the party solely on what I heard her say. That, and the way David suddenly seemed weird about his savings, along with Amy spending money in ways that didn't match what I knew about her job. I didn't have access to David's bank accounts, and I had no way of confirming if Amy had money or crypto. I urged David to check his own accounts, but he refused. The lack of hard evidence was a big reason why no one believed me. They thought I was making it up just to stir drama. But the conversation I overheard was detailed. Amy talked about the amount of money, moving it to crypto, and how she didn't think David would notice. That was enough to raise red flags. Still, it was something she said to someone else, not a direct confession to me or something I could document. Some people asked if anyone else might have heard what she said. The party was loud, and she was inside by an open window while I was outside. It's possible someone else could have overheard, but if they did, they probably didn't catch as much as I did or didn't realize the seriousness of it. I didn't see anyone react like they'd heard anything unusual. I might have only caught the loudest or clearest parts of her conversation. What I shared in my first post came from exactly what I heard and the gut feeling it gave me, especially considering how careful David usually was with money. He had always been good at saving. He wasn't someone who needed money, so losing $30,000 might have gone unnoticed unless he was checking that specific account closely, and he might not have been, except when planning to buy a house. Amy had a regular job. Her salary seemed average. It didn't make sense that she suddenly had enough for expensive jewelry or trips, unless she was using David's money or their shared funds. A few people suggested I should have just talked to David privately instead of speaking up in front of everyone. But I did try. I talked to him alone several times after I heard Amy's conversation. I told him exactly what I was worried about and begged him to check his finances. Each time, he got angry and shut me down. He refused to even consider that I might be right. So, yes, what I did at the engagement party was drastic. But I felt like I had no other option left. I hoped that calling it out in front of everyone might shock him into listening, or maybe make Amy slip up and reveal something. It was a big risk, and it didn't work the way I hoped. After reading all the feedback from the first post, some agreeing Amy seemed suspicious, some criticizing how I handled things, I spent a lot of time thinking about where things stood. Nothing had really changed. David still wasn't speaking to me. They went through with the marriage. And now, I was hearing from other family members that Amy had been cheating. My main issue wasn't whether or not I should act on the cheating. It was about what all of this meant for my place in the family and with David. Some people said maybe I should reach out now, that he might finally be ready to hear me out because his marriage was falling apart. But when I thought about everything that had happened over the past year, I remembered that he didn't just ignore me. He got so angry, he punched me and completely ended our relationship. What I said at the engagement party, my choice, led to a public and painful break between us. David made it very clear who he believed. He chose Amy. He sided with her over me, his own brother. And when he married her without even inviting me, that choice was reinforced. Even if Amy cheating now makes him question her, that doesn't undo what he did to me. It doesn't fix the broken trust between us or repair our bond. I tried to protect him and paid a heavy price. But he pushed me out without hesitation. Thinking back on all of this, reaching out now, especially with any kind of "I told you so," even if I didn't say it directly, just didn't feel right. It wouldn't help. If anything, it might just make him angry all over again. And even if he did listen, it might only be because his marriage is falling apart, not because he truly sees where I was coming from. Being cut off wasn't just a temporary break. It was a clear, firm statement of how he felt about me. And I don't think him having problems now changes that. So I decided not to reach out to David. I didn't message him, didn't call, didn't try to see him. I did nothing to reconnect. I also chose to keep things the same with my parents, limited contact. I still answered their calls and replied to messages, but I didn't ask for details about David or offer opinions about Amy or her cheating. When they mentioned the issues in his marriage, I just listened. I didn't say I was right. I didn't try to prove anything. When other family members talked to me, I did the same. I acknowledged I'd heard there were problems, but didn't bring up the past or talk about what I'd done. The result? Nothing changed between David and me. He didn't contact me, and I doubt he even noticed that I didn't reach out. He's likely too busy dealing with his own mess. My conversations with my parents remained strained but civil. They're clearly upset about what's happening with David and maybe starting to question some things, but they haven't tried to get us to fix things. They never outright said Amy was lying, or that my earlier warning about her character had been right. The family mostly kept their conversations focused on the cheating itself, as if that was the only issue. Update 2. It's been about 6 months since I shared the last update, which means it's been about a year since David and Amy got married, and around a year and a half since I first overheard Amy talking about the $30,000. A lot has happened since David found out about her cheating through the texts. After David read the messages and confronted Amy, things got really bad between them.